Okay, thank you for that reminder. Please always remind me at the beginning of sessions to start recording, just in case. So just to recap, the way that these sessions will run, at least my sessions, are totally up to you guys. One thing we could do is go through a separate project every week and focus on one specific feature we want to implement and how we go about doing that, and like really dig in depth as to how we're using these different features that we're learning. I think that can be a really helpful supplement to the textbook, which is just telling you this is a thing that exists in this one very small little example, and kind of understand like, okay, where would I actually use this in a real website? And how do I like build intuition of, well, I want to do this thing, so I probably need this feature. I think people generally were pretty responsive to that. And I recorded all the sessions so people could go back afterwards, but it ended up being like a lot of content in 1 week. And sometimes it was hard to keep up if we were trying to run through things or if people had missed a previous week. So that's one option of something that we can do. If we want to just focus specifically on questions related to the content, that will always come first. So in future weeks, please show up, bring all of your questions, anything that you want to know, any challenges you had with an assignment or something that you were working on but were unsure about. We can always do group debugging sessions. I think those are really, really helpful to get to see other people's code and how we go about solving those problems. Granted, the meeting is on Thursday, so probably everyone will turn in their assignments for the week a couple days before. So there may not be any questions about assignments. That's totally fine. If there are any, you can always take them to one-on-one mentors as well. So that's something else we could do. We could also just completely ignore the content of the week and talk about tangentially related topics. I love to just talk about things that will be useful to you at some point, even if they're not directly part of the curriculum. A couple things we mentioned last summer were TypeScript and why does TypeScript exist and why might you be interested in using it. We could talk about all different kinds of node packages, which is something that you'll start learning about this week when you set up your React project for the first time. How can I use other people's libraries in my own project so I don't have to rewrite any code that already exists? We could talk about things like that. We could talk about just general professional things. I am a very young person and I have worked in the industry for about 1.5 years now. So I'm not like an expert in anything, but I can at least try and help fill in some gaps for anything you guys are curious about. Although many of you guys probably have been at this longer than I have. It'll totally be up to you guys. So I will always leave at the beginning of the session an opportunity for you guys to leave questions or talk or mention things that you want to talk about. And feel free as well to send me a message and say, hey, I was curious about this. Could we talk about it at the next group session? The answer will probably be yes. So always reach out. I will do my best to post meeting agendas at least the day before or the morning of a session so you can see what we're going to talk about, if it's something that you really want to be there for, if it's something that you are already familiar with and you probably don't need to be there, if it's something that you can't make but you would like to watch the video afterwards. We'll, feel free to look at the agenda and decide whether or not you need to be here. You do not need to do the node class. You can do React and then go straight into the apprenticeship, or do React and then go into the practicum, or whatever. There's no expectation that you know anything about Node from like a back-end development perspective. We're going to be using Node just in the general sense of Node is a runtime environment for JavaScript. So what that means is anytime you write code, you need a compiler which turns that code into binary or something that can actually be run by the machine. Or you need a runtime environment, which takes your code that's not necessarily compiled and runs it in a specific setting. The typical way we run JavaScript is directly inside of your web browser, which means like your code exists in a web page, and when that web page loads, it runs your JavaScript, and that's it. That's just all it does. But we also want to be able to run JavaScript and extend JavaScript beyond the browser. And so that's why Node exists. Node is like a program that you can download that will take JavaScript, which normally only exists in your browser, and can just run it like any program on your computer and do anything you want. And Node is really helpful because it's where React lives. You can install a React project, and React is just a bunch of JavaScript, a bunch of code that runs that compiles your React into an actual web page with just vanilla HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So it runs your non-browser code in the browser, which will make a little more sense in future weeks. So everyone will have to have Node, the program, but like Express.js, which is the library that you would use if you were doing backend web development. That's what they talk about in the Node class, and you don't have to know anything about that. We will never touch it. But please feel free to do your own research and learn it on the side if it's something you're interested in, doing both sides. This is a beginner React course. It does not expect you to know anything coming in about anything. All of your questions, send them to either a group mentor or a one-on-one mentor, or you can always message me, even though I'm not a one-on-one mentor, about something I talked about or something you're curious about. We are all available all the time. Please ask all the questions. Okay, so that's all the stuff that I wanted to just mention at the beginning about how my sessions personally are going to work, and presumably some of the other group sessions. I will now open the floor for as long as we need to answer your questions. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or leave them in the chat. Anything about me, about this class, about these sessions that is still unknown.
I have some questions.
Go for it.
One of the first question is, I was reading in the book and it says like plain vanilla. Is that like just to say like simple? I mean, like vanilla JavaScript? Like, is that just another way to say like plain JavaScript? Or is that like literally like something like a whole nother library, or like a whole nother, like what do they mean vanilla JavaScript?
This is a really good question. Let me see if I can find a diagram that would be helpful to sort of explain this. Otherwise, we'll just go through it the hard way. Okay, this one's decent. So what we mean by vanilla JavaScript is JavaScript as it's defined by all of your browsers, where browsers are saying, if you write this JavaScript, it's going to do this thing to your web page. So in the end, anything you see on the web is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Like, that's it. There's a base definition of what JavaScript is. That's what your browser understands. That's vanilla JavaScript. Because people are not satisfied with just normal vanilla JavaScript, and we want to create these really complicated ways of writing code faster and not having to write as much code to do the things that we want to do, which is create like really impressive web pages that do really complicated things. People have created Node, which allows you to run JavaScript in other places other than the browser, and extends what normal JavaScript can do. So JavaScript is just a language with a definition, and your browser implements essentially like, when you write this particular JavaScript, it's going to affect the website in this way. And Node runs JavaScript and says, when you write this JavaScript, I'm going to do it this way instead. And it interacts with your computer instead of your browser specifically. And then on top of that is what we have React up at the top. We're going to ignore like this DOM stuff for now. That'll make more sense in future weeks, and I think the book can do a better job of explaining. But React is like not normal JavaScript. Like, if you wrote some React code and then just tried to like load it into a web page directly, it would be complete garbage and would not make any sense. It defines all these crazy things that don't exist in normal JavaScript, like JSX, which is a way that you can like create layouts with JavaScript instead of HTML. And it looks a lot like HTML, but it's not. It's not JavaScript either. And there's lots of things that React implements, JavaScript features that they don't exist in the browser directly. And so what we do is we take React and we write all of this code that's defined in React. Like they've defined these different way of writing code and all these functions that you can use that are really helpful that don't really mean anything to the browser. And it sort of translates it into vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that the browser does understand, that's like defined by the language specifications of JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, and runs all of that. So when you run your React project in development, you're not going to like do anything special. You're just going to run a script that says npm run, and that will start up a process that like translates on the fly your React code into the vanilla JavaScript, HTML, CSS that runs in your browser. And you can test your application live in the browser. But when you actually want to put your app out into production, into a real website, you compile your JavaScript, you build it, and it takes all of your React code and translates it into this really complicated piece of garbage that is actual plain JavaScript. It'll be totally illegible, it'll be machine generated, but it'll do the exact same thing that you've defined with your React code. And then that plain JavaScript you can put directly in a browser on a website and that'll execute. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. You said you had a couple questions. Do you have other questions?
Yeah, but if anyone has any other questions, like feel free to interrupt me. Yeah, where did my other questions go? Oh yeah. NPM. I just was curious because here we use it to like start, build, test, and I forgot the other one, but we use it to do run all those. But I'm just curious, like how does using NPM look like outside of React?
This is a really good point. And I think this is the best way to answer this would be doing a little demo of setting up a React project and sort of talking through all the components. But essentially, like NPM it stands for Node Package Manager, and it's just a tool built onto Node, the runtime environment that lets you run JavaScript anywhere outside of the browser. NPM is just a tool that can download Node packages or libraries that people have created of JavaScript code that you can then import in your code and use instead of rewriting all the code that they already wrote. So NPM is just a tool that gets called to pull a new package and install it, or to remove a package from your project. NPM isn't something that interacts with React directly. It interacts with Node. And Node, several of those packages together comprise React. And React has its own tools to start up a server that translates your code on the fly to native browser code using its own scripts. And Node has a specification called a package.json that essentially just defines your Node project. And part of that is scripts. So in that package.json, you'll have a script section, which is commands that you can run that will do something with Node. And those scripts are usually install package or start up my application. So like your Node specification, your package.json will specify the commands that are going to start up your application, and then you can run those commands really easily. NPM, I think for all intents and purposes, the only thing that relates to React directly is that React is a couple of different packages that you need to install using NPM. We'll do a quick demo of this if we have time, and I think it'll make more sense.
So, like, can NPM then be used with like other languages? Is that what I'm understanding? Like, can they also use it as a tool for like their like I guess node packages if they need them?
So Node is specifically for JavaScript, and NPM is specifically for Node. It's JavaScript
Okay.
that's been written with Node, presumably, that can actually interact with packages which are hosted somewhere online. So Node is to JavaScript, NPM is to Node. There are other
Okay.
runtimes for JavaScript. There's something called Bun that I haven't tried before, and I think there's a couple others that functions the same way as Node. They take your JavaScript and run it outside of the browser and do some crazy stuff. And they have their own package managers. So NPM doesn't exist in Bun. Bun has its own thing that also downloads JavaScript packages.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Ooh, this is another good question in the chat from Jenny. So we have Yarn and NPM. To my knowledge, both of them are package managers, and I'm pretty sure they do the same thing. There's going to be some differences, but you could use either one, and it would be, you could accomplish all the same things, which is manage all of your packages that you're using in the project and install new ones and remove them as needed. They'll do the exact same thing. The one difference is the file that specifies like the versions of all of your packages and the packages those packages require to function. There's this really complicated file that when you use NPM is called package.lock, and it's auto-generated. You should never touch it if you don't have to. Just let Node handle it. It's for Node to know that this project uses this exact version of this package. And Yarn does the same thing, except I think it's called yarn.lock, and it probably has a different format, but it does the exact same thing. What happens if we accidentally install both because we forgot what we installed? You should stick to one for each project, but you can have both installed on your computer at the same time, no problem. NPM comes with Node. I don't know exactly how you obtain Yarn, the package manager, but once you start a project, you should stick to either Yarn or Node because they do like create files for themselves that the other will not understand. I think for the purposes of this class, everything is done in NPM, and NPM is probably more common. So I would stick to that if you don't have a reason to use Yarn, but they both work. Anything else?
I do have a question.
Okay.
I forgot what part of the lesson this was, but it was at like talking about how it's like when you're doing something, I think with GitHub, it's asking for your credentials or something. And I was like in my computer didn't ask me for credentials of nothing. I'm not really sure what that is. That
Okay.
like a security issue that I'm having or something I should be worried about?
If you know that your code did successfully get submitted to GitHub, then it probably means your credentials are just saved on your computer already, which is
Mm.
something that happens usually after the first time you type in your credentials. I know I have them saved, and most people do because trying to type them every time is really annoying. But for context, when you create your project in this unit, you're going to create a repository on GitHub, which will hold all of your code and also allows reviewers to know where to go to look at your code so that they can see each week what you've worked on. And you write your code locally on your computer, and then you push it once it's ready. You commit and then push it. And it takes all of your code and moves it into the repository, which exists somewhere in the universe, wherever the GitHub servers are. And when you push it for the first time, it should ask you your credentials for your GitHub account, which will be a username and your password, although they might actually make you use like a really complicated passkey or secret token or something, because I think they've gotten rid of password support. That's not true. I know. You'll have to put in your credentials into your terminal when you push it for the first time, but ideally they would save after that, so you don't have to do it every time.
There should be a box. I yesterday had the same problem. There should be a box that says that you can just mark it and reuse your code, reuse your password all the time. Just whenever you're trying to push it, just mark the box and you'll be good to go. Because yesterday I had the same thing with the OSX keychain.
Yeah, OSX keychain, I think will save all of that for you as well if you're on Mac. On Windows, I don't know exactly what the process is. I assume that when you say this, you were using the GitHub like GUI, the GUI, rather than doing GitHub or using Git through your terminal. In which case there would be a checkbox. But if you're using your terminal, it'll probably give you a prompt in the terminal. If you have issues with credentials or SSH key, do we schedule a one-on-one? Yes, that would be a great candidate for scheduling a one-on-one. Everyone who is a one-on-one mentor either works as a software developer of some kind or has gone through these classes and can definitely help you out with that. If you have like a very specific issue that you just need to resolve before the deadline and there's no mentor sessions coming up, definitely schedule a one-on-one. Lots of people to schedule them with. So hopefully it'll be flexible. Okay. If there are no other questions, I'm going to very quickly try to show you the process for creating your React app and then sort of talk about some of the stuff that you're going to see to try and explain what it all means. First assignment should be due Tuesday nights. They should always be due Tuesday nights. If you're late, it's not really a problem. Just contact your reviewer if you know who they are to let them know, but there's no penalty. You can always catch up if you're behind. It'll help you to try and stay ahead of things, but certainly not a problem. Okay, I'm going to very quickly create a React app for my terminal and show you a couple things that I think will be helpful for getting started. And I'm following the instructions. I don't know if that's true. Definitely not after the first week, but if like 3 or 4 weeks in you haven't done anything, people will probably assume that you're just not there. But if you're showing signs of activity in any way, that's all we need. We just need to know that you're still alive and you're still interested in participating. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys really quick what it looks like to create a new React app. And I'm just going to follow the instructions that you can find on your student dashboard under the lesson. So just pretend it's magic for now, but it'll make sense later. First thing you're going to need is to install Node in whatever way your operating system allows. For Windows, I think I have to download an executable. For Mac, you could do something like Homebrew, which is really helpful. But eventually, you should be able to just type in Node, and it'll start up this environment where I can write JavaScript and execute it in my terminal. Cool, and it prints out hello to me. So just wrote my first JavaScript. You can see that my Node version, this runtime environment, is version 20. Am I not sharing the whole screen? Share screen. Can you guys see this terminal okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry if I wasn't sharing. That's my bad. Okay, so you should be able to type in Node here and get a version. You could also should also be able to do node -- version, and I'll give you that same version. So at this point, I should be able to run npm create Vite at latest. And your instructions will tell you to put a bunch of dashes and stuff at the end. I'm not going to do that just so you can see the whole process. But again, we're using npm, which is our package manager, and it's going to create a project from this Vite package, which is just sort of like a bootstrap for running code. Definitely worth looking into Vite a little bit more. It's a really cool tool, but we're just going to skip over it for now. So this is going to give us like a survey prompt for setting up our project. Let's call this test CTD application. And it's going to give us all these different frameworks. So React is a framework for web development. Framework means they've defined a bunch of code, like a bunch of shorthands for really complicated code that can make your life a lot easier. So Vue is another framework. It abstracts some of the difficulty of front end away. Preact, Split, Svelte, Solid, Quick, all these exist. We're going to use React. So definitely use your arrow keys and make sure you're on React. It's also going to let us create a project from TypeScript or from JavaScript. We are not going to cover TypeScript explicitly as part of the curriculum, but I would like to talk about it at least once during a group session because I think it's super cool. And you should be using TypeScript wherever possible, but just maybe not for this class. For now, we're going to stick to JavaScript. TypeScript is JavaScript, but it means that you can't, like every variable has to have a type. It has to be a number. It has to be a string. JavaScript, your variable can be literally anything you want. And it's a huge cause of bugs because you can have things that are not the type that you expect. And it's hard to keep track of what things are supposed to be. And it's just really complicated. TypeScript is like a sanity check for you. You know exactly what you're getting. And it helps you out a lot. Cool, that was really easy. So now I have a React project. And I'm going to cd into it, and then I'm going to open it in VS Code. I would highly recommend that everyone install VS Code. I think it's a really great, very simple IDE that you can use as much of as you want without being overwhelmed. As part of this agenda for today, I added some links at the bottom. Sorry, not links. I added some settings at the bottom that I suggest once you install VS Code to set these things up. VS Code allows you to install extensions, which sort of change your editor to do some really helpful things for you. So ESLint allows your browser to check that all of your JavaScript code is actually valid, and it'll like warn you if it's not, which is like the most important by far. I think also one thing that I noticed last summer is that people would really, really, really benefit from having a code formatter format their code for them. So when I write code, I don't write it perfectly formatted all the time. I write like all my stuff in one line, and then I hit save and let my editor change my code so that it's structured properly and everything lines up nicely and I can see what code goes with what. Definitely let a formatter do that for you. Like, don't worry about it, and it'll help you out so much. These other things are kind of optional, and these settings down here definitely will help if you install a code formatter. It'll help run that automatically. So these extensions are part of the browser or part of VS Code itself. There's an extensions tab over here, and you can search for a specific extension you want and then install it. There'll be an install button somewhere. And it's part of your browser. It's not part of a specific project. It's part of your whole editor. And all projects you open in VS Code will use that browser by default, or that extension by default. Just super, super helpful. So definitely take a look at extensions, take a look at your settings. But for now, what you'll see when you create a new project is all of these different files. And one thing that our terminal told us to do is to run npm install, which we will do. npm install, again, we're using our node package manager, which means we're probably like interacting with JavaScript libraries. And install means take all of the packages that this project defines that it needs and install them to the project. And you'll see that it just generated for us a file up here in the corner called node modules. Yeah, we'll definitely have a recording of this session afterwards. I will attempt to post it within a couple days. So this node modules folder is just full of folders of code that people have written in their own JavaScript projects. And these are all the packages that are required by your project. Okay, so Olga says in our lessons, we're using create React app instead of Vite at latest. There might be a discrepancy in the lesson contents. In previous sessions, we used create React app, which does the same thing as Vite. It just sets up a project for you and handles all the dirty work of running it. But create React app is really old and not super well supported, and it's very slow. And Vite is a tool that is generally adopted now as what you should use creating a new project. If there's any documentation that still says to use create React app, please send me a link on Slack so that I can communicate that. If you go into your dashboard here, and I scroll down to this project setup, this is where we see npm create Vite at latest, along with the other stuff. I would follow your dashboard first. It's possible that like our really old GitHub instructions still say to use create React app, but just send me a link to what you saw, please, so I can fix that.
I have a question about that part,
Okay.
that line, because I'm just like confused in terms of like where I'm doing it. Like, because I want to make a new like directory and then a folder. Should I already be in the folder when I run that, or?
Yeah, this is a good question. So you should set up a project folder somewhere in your computer, wherever you want. It could be on your desktop, could be in your home directory, doesn't matter. When you run this Vite at latest or create React app, it will create a project with a specific name, and it'll create it in a subfolder of wherever you're running the command from under the same name. So what I did is I was in my home directory, which is user/Elijah, and I created a Vite project from my home directory. So I can go to my home directory /users. Actually, this isn't gonna work. But in my home directory, I ran that command and it created a subfolder in my home directory with the name of the project. I said, create a project named test CTD application, and that's what it created. And inside of that folder is where my project exists. So I would create a folder for like all my CTD stuff, go into that folder in your terminal using cd, and then run the command and name your project Grackle homework or something like that. And it'll create it in a folder called Grackle homework. And then you can go in and open your editor from there.
Okay, so like I could, because I have my I guess at this point 3 different folders for CodeTheDream, because I thought it'd be better to just keep them all separate, but there would be no problem if I just kept them all
You can
all
do
in like one
whatever you
folder.
want. If you want to
Okay.
combine them, you could literally just copy and paste them. You don't have to do anything for your terminal. Like your project exists in this folder, and outside the folder, it doesn't matter what's there or where it is. You can just copy the whole project folder to wherever you want it to be.
Okay.
Cool. All right, I want to talk about a couple things really quick because I know we're running out of time here, and then I'll let people go. And if anyone has any questions, they can stick around after. So I don't think there's anyone coming after us. So these are all the files that define your React project. Node modules is where all of your packages get installed. This is a folder that is also managed by React and managed by Node. You should not manually interact with this at all, ideally. Sometimes you might have to delete it and reinstall everything if you're having issues. But a mentor or Google will definitely tell you when you need to do that. Otherwise, leave it. You'll notice that we have a git ignore file, which specifies all the files that we don't want to put into our GitHub repository, which is usually like configuration that's only for you and not for everyone else, or things that are really big and you don't want to upload because they're too big. In this case, this node modules folder is probably like several megabytes, hundreds of megabytes even. It's so big that it would make our Git commits very, very large. And so we don't want to put node modules in there. And things like VS Code, this is where all of our VS Code configuration goes. And that's just my configuration. Other people have different configurations, so we don't commit them out. This git ignore is auto-generated by Vite. If you're creating a project from scratch without using Vite, then you'd have to manually create it, but it should be created for you. And you'll notice that we have our package.json and our package lock.json. Our package.json is the node template for how our project looks. So it specifies all the things about our node project. It has a name, version, it's a module. It has all these scripts that I can run, which means that I can run these scripts to actually do something. Let's run this app just to show you what it looks like. It shows us that we have a dev script, which is for running our code in development. So we're going to npm run dev. And npm run takes a script from inside of this package.json and runs that particular script. So it's telling us our application is running. It's running locally, so only on our computer, and it's at this link. So I'm going to click on this and hope that it opens. Cool. We have a React project. We didn't do anything. We just clicked a button and it ran it for us. Eventually, we'll tear all this away and do our own stuff, but we'll leave it for now. One thing to note is that when you're writing code, it's generally a good thing to run your dev script and then just leave it open. I can edit code. In this case, let's say I remove my index.js or main.jsx. Let's remove this app component, which is literally our entire project. Like all the code is in app.js, and let's just render this nothing burger to the screen. And it takes all of our content away. It does it on the fly. We don't have to restart our server. It just does this for us. Super, super helpful. Leave it open. It should just auto update everything for you that you need. Okay, other things to talk about. Eventually, once you compile all your code, it's just vanilla JavaScript and HTML and CSS, right? We already mentioned that. This index.html is the actual HTML page that is going to be running in your browser in the end. And there's nothing in here because React is a way that we can specify all of our content and all of its behaviors only in JavaScript. And then React takes all that, compiles it into something that it knows, and then directly inserts it into this root element, which you'll see here. We're creating our root by getting that root element. This has ID of root, so we're getting the thing that has an element ID of root, and then we're rendering inside of it our application. This is garbage for now, probably doesn't mean anything, but that's overall what's happening. Other things, package lock. We said this is auto-generated. It has this really complicated version mapping of this package needs this and this package needs this. Don't touch it. ESLint RC, Vite config. This is just stuff that Vite uses. Again, don't edit this unless you need to. The main stuff that you care about is going to be in here. In our JSX files, which is where we're going to actually write all of our React code. So this is some template React stuff that it's giving you. You will change all of this in the first week. If you have any questions about what this means, we'll talk about all of this over the next many, many weeks. And for now, if you're starting your own project, you can literally take everything out and start from square one. I think it'll probably tell you to do a couple things as part of the homework this week. So this is generally where you start from. Okay, we are past 8 o'clock. I don't want to hold anyone more. If there's any lasting questions, feel free to stay on. Ask me. I'm here as long as you guys need me. I will submit this recording as soon as I can, probably tomorrow because I'll be out for the weekend. But if not, it'll be early next week. And I will link it for you guys. Or I'll post an announcement when I do. And then I think there's an Airtable link that should be accessible to you guys. I don't know exactly where it is. It might be part of this. Not exactly. I think if we go into Grackle announcements, mentor session schedule. No, it's not in here. Okay, somewhere there is an Airtable link which just has all of the Zoom recordings that people submit. And I will submit all my recordings there. They'll be available on YouTube. I will link those for you guys in an announcement shortly after our meeting, not the same day, but as soon as I can get up to uploading them. I will try and upload every single week unless I forget. So please remind me as much as you. Attendance, I have all of you guys down. I will submit that immediately afterwards. You don't have to do anything about attendance. You just have to show up whenever you want. You don't have to sign up for anything. That's on me. Again, feel free to ask any questions. If not, thank you guys so much for being here. I don't know exactly what we're going to do next week. I need to plan that over the weekends. But next week, we'll jump straight into the nitty-gritty and start talking about content rather than high-level stuff. Have a good weekend. Good luck with your first week. And I hope that you guys have an awesome experience here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Have a good weekend. Bye.
Elijah, I have a question.
Go for it.
Yeah. In terms of the assignment, when we turn in for this week, I really haven't looked at it carefully. I think we have to do like maybe a to-do list, but when we turn in our link from GitHub, do we have to turn in like I'm sorry, when we work on it, do we work on it on the main branch, or do we always have to branch out into a separate branch and do a PR?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the end, you should be doing each week from a different branch and creating a pull request in your GitHub repository that will attempt to merge that branch where you develop that week's code into your master. But don't do that right away. Don't actually hit the merge button. Just leave it open and submit a link to that pull request as part of your submission form. What mentors will do is they will look at your pull request, which has your branch on it, and will look at the code that you've written on that branch that adds to your previous week, and then review that code, leave you any suggestions on the pull request, or just send you a direct message if it's something really complicated to explain, or try and schedule a one-on-one with you. And you can make any changes that your mentor thinks that you should change. And once they approve it, which you'll get an email for once they submit their approval form, or you'll get an email when they submit their form saying, hey, I think you need a couple changes. I left some comments on your PR. And once you do that, then you can merge your branch into the master branch. So your master should always be up to date with the most recently fully completed assignment. And then once you've merged that in, you can start on the next week by creating a new branch from your new master, which has all of your up-to-date code, and writing some new code on there, create a pull request, and eventually merge that in, create a new branch, so on and so forth every week. Sometimes your reviewer will not get to it right away, and so you might have to create a branch just in advance, even though your previous one hasn't been merged in yet. And that can get a little more complicated. So if you have any like really complicated Git scenarios, always feel free to reach out to a one-on-one mentor.
Okay. So we should be merging after someone has looked at the code.
Exactly. You open the pull request, and that's what they look at to see all the new code. And then you can merge it in afterwards and start your next week once you merge it in.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. All right.
It'll
Thank you.
make a lot more sense after a week or two of doing it. It takes everyone a little while to sort of get the flow of how it works. So no worries.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Same to you. Instructions for creating a branch and pull request. I'm not sure if it's part of the class materials for this class. There might be some class materials from the intro because I think that's when they start doing Git. But there are so many websites that can help you with all the Git commands. If you just search up, how do I create a branch? There will be a Stack Overflow link, which has exactly how to create a branch and a really good explanation. Truly, all of my Git questions, I just ask on Google, and Stack Overflow tells me exactly how I have to do it. I still do this to this day at work. There's really complicated things that I don't know how to do, and the internet is super helpful. Yes, after you approve, then you merge your branch into the main branch. There will be a button on your pull request that says merge once it gets approved.
Eli, I just wanted to clarify about create React app and create with latest. I just found, so I go to my dashboard, found the documentation, instruction, assignment documentation, right? And create React app was in the video. That's why I just had some misunderstanding
Okay,
about this. So
that is good to know.
everything, yeah, everything is fine, but just I just tried to follow the video and saw their create React app. That's why I asked.
Yeah, we can
But
definitely clarify that. Those videos, I think, were created like maybe a little over a year ago. And I think the curriculum that changed from using Create React App to Vite happened very recently, like either for this class or the one before. So it's a very new transition, and we're still trying to like bridge all the gaps. There'll probably be more instances where something really old contradicts with our new instructions on the dashboard. So always feel free to bring that up. I will let Mary Alice know that the videos are contradictory about creating the project, and maybe we can add some disclaimers.
yeah,
about that.
and when I watched this video, I was curious about the Create React app. Why do you use it? But you use it. It's okay. Everything is fine. Thank you.
That's super helpful. Thank you for catching that.
Yeah, thank you for the session. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Yeah, totally not okay if you did not go through the intro class. A lot of people join straight into React or into the Node course or Ruby on Rails, especially if you've had any coding experience outside. They'll encourage you to skip over the intro class. This is totally fine. If you haven't done a whole lot of Git or you haven't done any Git, Google's your best friend. No one's a Git expert. Eventually, once you do it enough, you'll just kind of remember the important commands. But there's always really complicated Git operations that like I will never remember, and so I always consult Google. So never feel bad about not knowing how to do something with Git. It's really complicated. Git rebase is a great example. I did not know how to do that until this year because my job made me do it, and it makes a lot more sense now. So Google's super helpful. We could definitely talk about rebasing as a future session. I'm gonna actually write that down as a possibility because I think it could be really helpful. Some more complex Git operations. Topics. All right. Oh, I forgot to ask people to fill out the form. Dang it. All right. I'll have to put that in the announcement section.
I have a question about the instructions for the project setup.
Okay.
Why are we cloning an empty repo? Is it just to practice cloning, or I don't understand the purpose?
Cloning an empty repo.
Because we make one in GitHub, there's the React to do, and then it says like make your folder or wherever you're gonna put it, and then it says clone the empty repo to that location. And I don't understand why.
Okay.
Like, do we have to do that, or can I just skip straight to the npm create React and then like push it?
Yeah, this is also a really good question. I sense there's going to be a lot of good questions in future weeks. So the GitHub setup is just creating like the location in the cloud somewhere that all of your code is going to live. And the reason why we put it on GitHub is so that if our computer dies tomorrow, we can install it from a different computer, or other people can work on it, or other people can see it in this case. But it's literally just a house for your code. You don't like write any code on there. You write all of your code locally. And once you're ready to commit it, which means like this is working code that I know that I want to have in my project, that's when you push it up to the top. So your GitHub setup is just creating that empty repository, and your local setup is creating your actual project code and installing all the packages you need and writing the stuff that it's telling you to do here, which is creating a list or creating a React component and stuff like that. And eventually, once you're finished, that's when you definitely want to hook up the two so that you can say, I have my code here, I want to push it to the empty repository. And once you push it the first time, it will no longer be empty. And that's when Git starts to really be helpful, because it can actually track individual changes you make to the previous version of code. So the two ways of doing that are either you create the empty repository and then you clone it, which in the background sets up Git to identify like where that Git repository lives somewhere in the cloud. So Git, the tool on our command line, does not know by default where that code needs to go when I push it. And so cloning sets that up for us by taking whatever code is already in there, in this case, nothing, pulling it down if there is anything, which there isn't, and then setting up the tracking information so that it knows the other direction where to push the code. Generally, we would clone a project that already exists and has code in it, and it will just take all that and set it up exactly as it looks on your computer. You can clone in this case at the end because it's empty. There's nothing in there right now. All you're doing is setting up that tracking information to go the other direction. I think the better way of describing this that would be less confusing is to actually like set up that tracking information by hand rather than cloning the repository to do it for us automatically. So let me show you really quick what we're doing under the hood when we clone. So I'm going to create a random repository for SCT application. It's going to be private because I'm going to delete it right afterwards. Okay, so we have this empty repository. It's actually telling us down here what the best way to do this would be rather than cloning it, but we're gonna do this by hand. So I'm going to take the link here, and I'm going to go into my project that I just bootstrapped, and let's say I did all my changes for the week and updated all my React code. Inside of here, I can run git status to check, has this already been set up as a Git project? In this case, no, it's not a Git project. So we're going to do git init, which just creates all the secret Git stuff that allows us to track changes. So now if I run git status, it's going to tell us we're on the master branch of this project. There's no commits to it yet. We haven't put any code in this project. I can git add everything. So now it's all green, which means our project is going to start tracking all of these files. And I'm going to git commits. And I'm going to call this commit message project setup. And committing means take all this code that I changed, put it into one unit that identifies a change, and attach a message to it to let us know what's actually inside of this commit. So now we have our commit. And it's still local. It only exists here. Our GitHub repository still doesn't know about it. So we have to set up that tracking information. This is where I would do that git clone, or we're going to do this by hand where we need to set up a remote. So a remote tells Git where in the cloud does this local project exist. And in this case, we're going to add a remote. You could add several if you have your project tracked in multiple locations. But for all like 99% of purposes, you only ever have it in one place. And the de facto naming standard is origin. You could call it whatever you want, but this is what you'll see online, so I definitely stick with it. So we're going to add a remote, which means this is where my project lives, and I'm going to paste in the link to my application. So test.ct application, it's going to silently do its thing. And now if I run git push, and I'm going to say push to my origin, which we just created, and which branch are we going to push? We're going to push our master branch. And it's going to do this thing. It's not going to prompt me for my username and password because I've already done this before. But if I didn't, it would ask me for my username and password to log into my account. And now if I refresh the page, all my code exists here. So I can pull, I can push, I can do whatever I want. This project now directly faces this origin, which is on GitHub. And cloning does the same thing, but it hides that step of creating a remote and setting up the branch to track the right branch. So I think this is a better way of doing things just because it like forces you to understand what's actually happening and is a little bit less confusing about cloning an empty project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just like confused because I feel like this way, like the way you just did it, makes more sense in my head versus cloning it. But I see the difference now.
Yeah,
And
like
then
if we had a project that already existed and had code in it, like we can't just create a new React project. We have to have some way of actually getting that code. And that's when typically we would use a clone because it just takes whatever's currently in the project, downloads all the code to your computer, and then sets up the linkage for you. It definitely feels weird to use it in this context where we're just like creating a project from scratch. So totally justified. Sorry, I think I cut you off. You were going to say something else.
it's okay. For git push, when I was like doing the books or the following along with the video, I just did git push and it pushed it because sometimes I don't know like the other words that come after push, like you did git push origin master. That's where I started to get confused if I should be doing like adding more words or not. But then I check my GitHub and I refresh it and it's like my push went through without having to do all that, like the other things.
Yeah, this is also something that's super helpful and what I would typically do at work, just to git push rather than all the other stuff. Because again, like unless you're trying to do something really complicated, like trying to remember what exactly the words have to be is unnecessary and get confused for you. So typically your branches exist locally and your branches exist in the cloud and there's no like direct link between the two. And so you have to say, when I push my code to the cloud, I want to push to this remote, which is origin, which is our GitHub. And I want to push this specific branch, which has a new commit that I want to push. But most of the time when you're pushing, you're already on the branch that you're changing because you just wrote a commit. Like you're
Right.
trying to push the branch you're on. In which case, that's, let's say, I'm going to open this again. Let's make a change. Let's create a new file, test.txt. Hello. If I run git status, it'll show us we have a new change. I'm going to add this change and I'm going to commit and say this is our testing file. So now I have a new commit. This is new code that needs to get pushed to our GitHub repository. And instead of doing that, I can do just git push, and it's going to tell us the current branch has no upstream branch. Upstream meaning in our cloud, up the stream, that cloud doesn't have a link to our local for this exact branch. The master branch exists here and it exists up there, but there's no linkage. And so what we can do here one time is git push set upstream, which means take my branch master and link it to my master branch on our repository. And then from there on, you can just run git push every time. And it already knows I'm pushing my current branch. I know where it needs to go. It needs to go to that master branch, and it'll just do it for us. So you'll have to run this command one time. The first time you create a new branch, it'll tell you when you do git push that you have to run this. So I'm going to run this, and it'll set that linkage. It'll push for us. And then if we were to remove this, so now I have a new commit that needs to get pushed. I can run git push again, and it already knows that this branch needs to go to the master branch up there. So from now on this branch, anytime you make a change, you can just run git push. I would do this all the time. There are like basically no chances where you would push a branch that you're not on locally to a branch on the cloud, or like if you don't want to push master to master, like maybe you have a different branch that's named something else, but you want to push it to the master branch in the cloud, like that also is not really a thing that happens. So in most cases, this will suffice.
Okay. Thank you for answering all my questions and providing the examples. It's really helpful for me to see it also this way too.
That's my job. Thank you for asking so many good questions. It makes my life so much easier to be able to like know what I need to talk about and what doesn't make sense. So please continue asking all the questions.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Same to you.